Nerevar, I must ask you for a favor, for I am in a situation most dire. I was fired from my job as a cashier this afternoon, and will likely be unable to cover both my egregiously high rent in Dagoth, the building, and my groceries this month due to my paycheck that has been cut short. I am once again asking for your financial support. Yes, I know. Laughable that I, Dagoth, the god, have had to resort to the lowly work of a college dropout in order to make ends meet. But securing the amount of space and necessary materials to build a Kulakan isn't cheap in this clusterfuck economy. After my rent on Red Mountain was raised considerably by my mongrel dog landlord, I was forced to seek more consistent income in the form of a part-time job in order to remain in Dagoth, the building, continue my work in constructing Akulakan, and not live exclusively on instant ramen noodles. Unfortunately, the area surrounding Red Mountain is a desert of pain and despair with a dreadfully low amount of jobs, and so I was forced to endure a long commute to civilization in order to find work. It was during this search that I discovered the most disgusting host of high-turnover jobs in all Nirn had opened a 24-hour location in Aldrun. Yes, Nerevar, I am talking about a Walmart. They were hiring cashiers, offering an unusually high starting wage of 18 drakes an hour as well as a sign-on bonus. That was the first red flag I so woefully ignored. As I traversed the vast, rifted parking lot to the front doors, I noticed the considerable number of filthy, dented, poorly parked cars spread out in uneven grids for as far as the eye could see. This in itself was not an unusual sight to me, as these dirty outlanders get their driver's licenses from the backs of cereal boxes now that the Empire has overtaken Morrowind. However, as I neared the doors, I was met with a chariot that belonged in the dankest, darkest depths of an Argonian trailer park. It was a car, rusted to oblivion and back from hood to trunk, parked askew in a handicapped spot with windows so grimy I could not see my reflection in them as I examined it in equal amounts of horror and awe. The back seat of this vile vehicle was filled, from seat to ceiling, with wine bottles, beer cans, boxes, and other nondescript trash that crawled with every type of insect imaginable. In my desperation for work, I chose to ignore this second warning that my coming to this Walmart would be at my own peril, and continued to the doors in my hunt for a job application. The store was packed assholes to elbows the moment I crossed the threshold, full of the foulest examples of all Tamriel's inferior races, who each stank to high heaven with their own unique miasma of diabetes and body odor. I pushed my way through the mephitic masses to the back of the store to find the customer service desk. By then, my eyes watered, and my nose ran beneath my mask from the sheer reek of so many unhygienic pieces of mortal garbage being concentrated in one place. At the customer service desk, I was met with an Argonian with a look on his face that screamed, "By Almalexia's motherly mercy, please end my misery already." When I asked this hideous reptile for an application, he slowly blinked his glazed, half-dead eyes at me and asked me if I was sure. Yet another red flag, oh so foolishly thrown to the wind in the name of money. To make a long story short, I received a call from that Walmart some days later regarding a job offer. I asked the hiring manager about the lack of the traditional interview, only to be met with some arbitrary non-answer. In spite of everything my gut told me about declining the offer, I took it, to my great regret. I started my training as a cashier that same week, and during that training I learned the truths of Walmart the hard way. During my break on my first day, I went to visit the men's room to relieve myself, only to find that some mangy sugartooth had pinched one off in the one functioning urinal, leaving it there for all to behold in its foul and profane glory. In my horror, I chose to wait until the end of my shift, which would come in 4 tedious hours following my lunch break. It was that day I learned why I had been so easily hired. The hordes of rabid customers were non-stop from the time I clocked in for the day until the time I clocked out, and nary a cashier could be spared to serve them. They were so desperate for fodder that they would pick up any poor fool off the street to throw at their disgusting patrons, and that they would pay them unusually high wages in the hopes they would be more willing to endure the war crimes the customers would put them through. During a particularly heavy rush that first week, I served a woman who would tempt me to rip out every glorious hair in my head. In my 3,000 years of miserable existence, never once have I witnessed such a spiteful, bitter creature as the corpus-riddled Breton that entered my checkout line with 2 carts packed full of groceries. Undeterred in the face of the coming challenge, I greeted her in a cheerful tone and watched as she began transferring her mountain of imported imperial goods from her cart onto the conveyor belt with the slowness of a blighted scrib. It took her 10 painstaking minutes to unload just half of the first cart, and I would have begun bagging the moment she began unloading, but she hissed at me through her black teeth to wait until she was done unloading to her liking. By the time she had filled the conveyor belt with her imperial garbage food, the line had become 4 people deep. She then threw a handful of reusable bags at me and demanded I fit all of her groceries into them with nothing left out. I could tell immediately that I would not be able to fulfill her request, but knew better than to argue with her, lest I be fired and be forced to choose between food and rent. I opened one of her 3 puny reusable bags, only to find they were stained beyond recognition and were damp and smelled strangely, like crystal meth and animal abuse. Regardless, I bagged her groceries until her horrendously smelling bags risked tearing in order to hold their contents. By the time I was halfway through ringing up her order, I found that it was utterly impossible to place all of her items into the bags, and so I informed her of this. Her blistered face reddened, the veins in her neck bulged, and her forehead began to shine with sweat, and she began to shout at me, hurling every profanity and racial slur in Tamrielic at me, all over her grievous miscalculation of the capacity of her malodorous reusable bags. She then proceeded to show me how to bag her groceries correctly, only to find that she could not fit all her items inside either. This led to her becoming even redder in the face and throwing a can of wet cat food in my direction, pushing both of her carts over and exiting the store, leaving me to clean up her mess and place her items back on the shelf instead of having a lunch break. At the end of my shift, though I was exhausted from dealing with savages all day, I had to go shopping, as my pantry was running low on salt rice and instant ramen noodles. As I pushed my shopping cart through the produce section, I was met with a sight that would make any mortal sick to his stomach. A morbidly obese Khajiit, in spite of the blight storm raging outside throughout the month, had decided it was entirely appropriate to leave the house wearing nothing but a bra and short shorts. The stalwart soldiers that were her severely undersized clothes scarcely held on at the seams to clothe her at all as she staggered about the aisles with her overstuffed shopping cart, her skooma-crazed eyes swiveling about in her skull in paranoia at the people around her. I abandoned my cart right then and there and elected to simply forego obtaining my bare essentials for another night. My weary eyeballs could handle no more. In my time working at Walmart since then, I have witnessed a great litany of petty crimes. In the shift I worked following the scantily dressed Khajiit incident, I found myself having to negotiate with a shoplifting Bosmer, informing him that he, indeed, could not take an entire frozen chicken from the store without paying for it, and that stuffing it down his pants and waddling out the door with it was not enough to hide his shame. Just a few days later, management asked me to assist in escorting a man out of the store when he'd been found attempting to distill skooma in the baking islay. This man in particular had on pants that read "Live fast, eat ass" across the buttocks, and a hoodie that read "The gods won't let me die" across the chest. I do not believe these individuals were beaten enough as children. I have seen countless pieces of raw meat, some wrapped and some unwrapped, being left on various shelves throughout the store. One had been left in a cashier's candy aisle until it had gone green and rank. Truly, working in Aldroon's local Walmart supercenter has been what I imagined life in one of those medieval paintings of purgatory to be like, except that it and its denizens smell marginally worse. The latest and last offense, however, was the straw that broke the Silt Strider's back. An elderly Argonian in my line dropped several bags of frozen shrimp onto the belt and insisted the entire order was $5. I politely corrected her that the bags of shrimp were individually $5, but she didn't want to hear it and demanded to see a manager. Being that the Walmart is all but destitute of employees, there was no manager in the store that was unoccupied. Regardless, I stood my ground and repeated the correct price. This angered her, and she proceeded to pick up one of the bags of frozen shrimp and take a swing at my face with it, shrieking various slurs at me for not risking my horrid job to give away expensive seafood to her. Yes, Nerevar, I did defend myself. I shouted at her, "Is this how you honor the sixth house, the tribe unmourned?" and threw a bag of shrimp at her in turn. This glass-eyed lizard took the challenge with glee, and we began exchanging blows with each other as though our battle were a pillow fight between teenage girls. A crowd of customers and burned-out, bored employees gathered round us and beheld the fight. I quickly grew tired of this charade and dropped the scaly swit where she stood by, repeatedly beating her over the head with the bag of shrimp until she fell to the ground. In spite of this being a cut-and-dry case of self-defense from a crazed sugar-tooth lizard, I was then let go from the Aldroon Walmart and banned from ever entering the premises again, though the ban was unnecessary. For the rest of my immortal days, Nerevar, I, Dagoth the god, will never step foot in a Walmart again, and every Walmart in Tamriel will be among my first targets upon the completion of Akulakan. Now, Nerevar, to repeat myself, please help me with paying for my groceries, bro. My blood is about to turn to sludge from all the ramen I've been forced to eat, as it has been the only thing I have been able to afford, and I fear I may have to involuntarily fast once the ramen stash runs out in order to pay my rent this month. Please, Nerevar, be a bro.